The courtroom lights caught the shine of his badge as he staggered in, the scent of alcohol trailing behind him like a confession he did not mean to make. He smirked at Judge Judy, a crooked, reckless smirk that froze the entire room. Cameras shifted. The audience leaned in. Every eye locked on him as he opened his mouth to speak, and in that single moment of arrogance, he unknowingly triggered a legal earthquake that would destroy his career, expose corruption running through the entire precinct, and make history in ways he could never imagine. What he was about to say would change everything. Before we get into it, tell me, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments and hit subscribe for more shocking courtroom moments. He did not just enter the courtroom. He invaded it, stumbling forward like the badge on his chest weighed more than his conscience. The air tightened around him as if even the walls recognized something was wrong. The shine of his police badge should have symbolized authority. Instead, it betrayed him. Under the harsh courtroom lights, it reflected the tremor in his step, the blur in his eyes, the faint, unmistakable sheen of sweat marching down his temple. He tried to look steady, but his body told the truth long before he opened his mouth. The scent of alcohol followed him in a thin, sour ribbon, drifting through the rows like a secret he could not control. Judge Judy watched him without moving. Her stillness was its own force, measured, cold, uncompromising. The camera drifted in slowly, catching the exact moment her eyes narrowed, not in anger but in recognition. She had seen arrogance before. She had seen denial. She had seen intoxication. But rarely had she seen all three wearing a badge. The bailiff shifted subtly, not enough to draw attention, but enough to show he felt the tension too. In the front row, the plaintiff, a young store owner with tired eyes, clutched a folded receipt so tightly the paper trembled. He was not staring at the judge. He was staring at the officer who arrested him weeks earlier. The one now stumbling into court like justice was a joke he had told too many times. The officer finally found his balance, barely, and smirked. A crooked, reckless smirk that tried to claim control but only exposed desperation. His uniform hung slightly askew, his tie loosened, his posture off by just enough to betray the truth. He had come here drunk. On duty. On camera. In front of the one judge whose silence was louder than any accusation. Judge Judy leaned forward an inch. Not to intimidate, to observe. To measure the distance between who he pretended to be and who he really was. "Officer," she said, her tone flat as polished stone, "are you prepared to testify today?" He grinned wider, unaware that the room had already judged him before she ever could. His confidence swayed with the same instability as his stance. He lifted his chin, blinked too slowly, and waved a dismissive hand. "I am always prepared," he slurred, the words sticking together. "Even more than you, Judge." A hush cut across the courtroom like a cold wind. He had not just misspoken. He had crossed a line he could not uncross. Judy's expression did not change, but the air did. The cameras tightened. The plaintiff swallowed hard, sensing that something irreversible had just happened. Even the bailiff paused mid-step, watching the officer with a stillness usually reserved for dangerous animals. The officer, drunk on ego and alcohol, mistook the silence for weakness. And then he spoke again. A careless interruption. A disrespect so sharp it snapped through the room like breaking glass. The bailiff stiffened first. Then Judge Judy's eyes lifted, cold and precise, as she asked the question that would start unraveling everything. "Did you just interrupt me?" The insult still hung in the air when he smirked again, wider this time, as if daring the courtroom to react. It was the kind of smile that did not just challenge authority. It spat on it. Judge Judy's stare did not waver. She let the silence expand, stretching it until even the officer seemed to notice the weight of it. The cameras caught every microsecond, each frame a slow unmasking of the man who thought he owned the room. He shifted his feet, just slightly, but in a room this tense even subtle movements felt loud. "Officer," Judy said, her voice a blade drawn quietly, "you will speak when spoken to." He scoffed, actually scoffed. The sound cut through the quiet like a cracked note. The audience stiffened. The plaintiff closed his eyes for a second, remembering something he wished he could forget. "Judge," the officer slurred, leaning one hand on the desk for balance, "I've dealt with worse than this. I run raids. I deal with criminals. I do not need a lecture from someone who—" He paused only because gravity pulled him forward a half step. The smirk faltered. Not much, but enough. Judy blinked once, slowly. It was the kind of blink that meant she was done giving him rope. The kind of blink that, in her courtroom, usually preceded disaster for someone. The plaintiff tightened his grip on his papers. His throat bobbed as he swallowed, the memory of his arrest flickering across his face like a shadow passing under a streetlight. "Criminals," Judy repeated, her tone dangerously calm. "Sir, the only person displaying criminal behavior in this room right now is the one who can barely stand upright." The officer laughed, a hollow, echoing sound that did not match the panic tightening his jaw. "Oh, come on, you think you can touch me. I know how this works. Cameras, audience, your show." "This is not a show," Judy cut in softly. "This is a courtroom." Her voice dropped lower, colder. "And your badge does not give you immunity here." He straightened suddenly, fueled by defiance. "My badge gives me more than you think." Something shifted then, something invisible but unmistakable. Not in the officer, but in Judy. A subtle change in posture, a narrowing of her eyes, a signal that she had just reached the point where tolerance ended and judgment began. "Interesting," she murmured. "Let us test that theory." She reached to her right, lifting a thin folder, pale blue, unassuming. But the officer's reaction was instant, a flicker of recognition followed by a quick, poorly disguised swallow. The audience leaned in, the plaintiff's breath caught. Judy placed the folder gently on the desk, her fingers resting on it like she was holding down something that might otherwise fly away. "You seem confident," she said. "Let us see if the evidence supports that confidence." The officer tried to recover his smirk, but his lips twitched, just once, betraying the first crack in his armor. Judy tapped the folder once lightly and asked, "Tell me, officer, why does this file make you nervous?" His smirk vanished the instant he recognized the color of the folder. Pale blue, thin, government-issued, a file that should have been locked behind doors he thought no one could open. Judge Judy did not rush. She lifted the folder with the steady precision of someone who had no intention of wasting a single second. The cameras followed her hands, lingering on the label, worn, creased, and unmistakably official. The officer's eyes tracked it too, widening with each inch it rose into view. "That file," he muttered, voice cracking around the edges, "should not be here." Judy raised an eyebrow. "I gathered." She flipped it open with a soft rustle, the sound as sharp as a gavel strike in the heavy silence. The audience leaned forward, drawn by the tension in his posture. His bravado had collapsed into something brittle, an exposed nerve. The plaintiff watched him closely, his own breathing shallow, as if seeing something familiar in the officer's panic. Inside the folder lay a stack of complaint forms, each one stamped, dated, and painfully consistent. Written by different hands, signed by different civilians, echoing the same accusations. Abuse of authority. Intoxication on duty. Threatening language. Unlawful force. Judy turned a page deliberately, letting the weight of every word settle over the courtroom. The officer swallowed hard, jaw clenching, fingers twitching at his side as though itching for a weapon he could not use here. "These," Judy said, tapping a finger against the forms, "are allegations submitted over several years, all from different civilians, all remarkably similar." The officer attempted a laugh, forced, shaky. "Those were dismissed. They were lies. People complain all the time when they do not want to face consequences." "And yet," Judy continued, unbothered by his flailing attempts at deflection, None of these complaints appear in your official internal record." His pupils contracted. That single tell betrayed a truth far bigger than the file in her hands. Judy leaned back slightly. "So here is my question. Who made these disappear?" The officer opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came out, not at first. He blinked, gathering fragments of arrogance like broken glass, and forced out, "I do not know anything about that. People make things up. The precinct screens out nonsense." Judy watched him in a long, unbroken silence, a silence that pressed against him until sweat gathered at his hairline. "Funny," she finally said, "because this came directly from someone inside your department." A ripple went through the crowd. Even the bailiff glanced up sharply. The officer's face drained of color. "Inside my department?" "Yes." Judy closed the file gently, as though sealing something dangerous inside. Someone who believed these complaints deserved daylight. Someone who thought justice should not depend on who wears a badge. He shook his head slightly, panic beginning to shine through the alcohol. "That is impossible." "Is it?" she asked softly. "Or do you simply know exactly who would betray you?" The plaintiff exhaled shakily, a small piece of his fear replaced with something. G-like validation. Judy tapped the folder once more and asked, "Tell me, officer, who inside your own precinct wanted the truth out?" For a split second, his eyes did not show guilt, they showed fear. Not fear of Judge Judy, not fear of the courtroom, fear of someone who should have been on his side. The air in the room shifted the moment Judy asked the question. It was subtle, like a change in temperature, but everyone felt it. The officer froze, not physically but mentally. His pupils twitched, his jaw tightened, his shoulders locked in a strange, rigid posture that looked more like bracing than denial. "Someone leaked this," Judy continued, her voice calm, clinical, steady. "Someone who knows you." The officer's throat bobbed once as he swallowed. I have no idea what you're talking about." But he said it too quickly. Too sharp. Too rehearsed. The plaintiff saw it, the audience saw it. Even the bailiff, usually impassive, lifted his eyebrows. Judy did not blink. Curious reaction for someone who claims ignorance. The officer exhaled sharply, a frustrated huff masked as confidence. "Look, Judge, people do not like me. I make arrests. I enforce laws. Criminals hold grudges." "Criminals?" Judy echoed, tapping the file lightly. "Interesting choice of word, considering these complaints came from citizens reporting your behavior." His face twitched. The smirk was gone now, replaced by a fractured mask slipping faster than he could fix it. Judy leaned forward. "Let us stop the dance. You recognized this file before I even opened it, so I will ask you again, who leaked it?" His jaw worked side to side, the way a person chews on words they are afraid to speak. Finally, he muttered, "Probably some rookie, some jealous officer trying to make a name for himself." "No," Judy said softly, "this did not come from a rookie." Her fingers slipped a single sheet from the folder, its edges crisp. She read the first line under her breath, then lifted her gaze with a precision that felt like a spotlight snapping on. "This came from someone with rank." A gasp rippled through the gallery. The officer blinked hard, once, twice, trying to hide panic behind empty bravado. "Your Honor, that is not possible. No one with rank would." The side door creaked open. The courtroom turned. A retired sergeant stepped inside, his uniform gone but his posture still carrying the weight of decades in law enforcement. Silver hair, steady eyes, no hesitation. He walked with purpose, as if the room had been waiting for him. Judy nodded to him. "Sergeant Mills, thank you for coming." The officer's mouth fell open. No, no, he would never. Sergeant Mills stood beside Judy, hands clasped behind him. "I would," he said quietly, "and I did." The officer stumbled back a half step, the impact hitting harder than any physical blow. "You," he whispered. Mills looked him dead in the eye. You were not alone in your behavior, but you were the worst, and someone had to start talking. His voice was steady, honest, heavy with truth. Mills turned to Judy and added, "He was not acting alone, Judge. This goes higher than him." The room did not breathe for a moment, not when Mills spoke, not when the officer shook his head in disbelief. Truth had entered the courtroom like a storm, and everyone felt the temperature drop. Sergeant Mills stood tall, shoulders squared with the weight of years he could no longer carry alone. His presence was a quiet indictment, one that did not need raised voices or dramatic gestures. The officer stared at him, betrayed and bewildered, as if the man who once trained him had just turned into a stranger. "Mills," the officer choked out, "why would you come here? Why would you lie like this?" Mills did not flinch. "I did not lie. I stayed silent for too long. That is why I am here." Judge Judy's gaze moved between them, reading every twitch, every breath. "Sergeant, you said this goes higher. Explain." Mills inhaled deeply, the kind of breath a person takes before pulling off a bandage that has covered an old, festering wound. "Your Honor, the precinct has been burying complaints for years. Not just his. Many officers have behaved this way. But he," Mills gestured at the defendant, "he excelled at hiding behind the badge." The officer let out a hollow laugh, louder than before, desperate. "You are pathetic. A washed-up has been blaming others for your failures." But his bravado rang thin, trembling around the edges. Mills ignored the jab. "You think you are untouchable because certain supervisors shielded you. They saw your aggression as initiative. They saw your intoxication as stress. They saw your threats as miscommunication." Judge Judy leaned forward, elbows resting lightly on the bench. "Are you telling this court that superior officers knowingly protected misconduct?" Mills nodded once, firm, unwavering. "Yes, Your Honor." A sharp murmur cut through the gallery before the bailiff raised a hand for silence. The plaintiff's eyes welled, but not from fear this time, from recognition. From the realization that what happened to him was not an accident. It was a pattern, a system, a crack in the very structure meant to protect him. Judy turned to the officer. "Do you wish to respond?" The officer's face hardened into a mask of false confidence. "He is bitter. He wants revenge. I worked hard, made arrests, did my job. Some officers cannot handle the pressure." "Pressure," Judy echoed, "or privilege?" Her words hit him harder than any accusation in the file. He lifted his chin, attempting to recover his swagger. "Judge, you do not understand how things work. We enforce the law, we adapt, we—" "You drink on duty," Judy cut in. "You intimidate civilians, you threaten them, and your superiors cover it up." He flinched, a subtle recoil but visible enough. Mills cleared his throat. "Your Honor, there is more." The officer snapped, "Do not you dare." But Mills continued, steady as stone. "A captain encouraged this behavior, rewarded it, and punished anyone who questioned it." Judy did not blink. The plaintiff's grip loosened. The audience leaned in as if drawn by gravity. Judy lowered her voice, each word deliberate. "Sergeant, name the captain." The moment the monitor rolled into the courtroom, his confidence faltered. Just a flicker, but enough for everyone to see the truth tightening its grip. The bailiff guided the small screen into place, its wheels whispering across the floor like a warning. Judge Judy folded her hands, posture calm but eyes sharp. The officer watched the monitor as though it were a weapon aimed at his chest. The plaintiff leaned forward, breath shallow, recognizing the shape of the device even before Judy spoke. "This," Judy said quietly, "was sent anonymously to production. No return address, no note, just the footage." A ripple moved through the gallery, soft as a draft yet heavy as a storm. The officer's face paled. He shook his head once too fast. "Footage of what? People fake videos all the time." Judy did not respond. She nodded to the bailiff and the screen brightened. Static flared. A night scene emerged, streetlights glowing, wet pavement reflecting pale yellow halos. And then, the officer himself, uniform disheveled, movements unsteady. He grabbed the plaintiff by the arm, yanking him closer with a drunken sway. His voice carried through the speakers, loud, slurred, cruel. "You think the law protects you," his recorded voice growled. "I am the law." The courtroom gasped in a single, collective breath. On screen, he shoved the plaintiff against his car, leaning in too close, breath heavy, words sharper and more threatening than any weapon. The plaintiff, watching now, flinched, not at the memory, but at hearing it spoken aloud before an audience that finally understood. The officer in the courtroom tried to stand taller, but his knees softened. "That is taken out of context," he muttered. He was resisting. "That is enough," Judy said sharply. But the tape kept playing. There he was again, laughing while clearly intoxicated, mocking the plaintiff, mocking procedure, mocking the very system he was sworn to uphold. Judge Judy watched him crumble in real time, her gaze unwavering. Every few seconds she glanced at him, not with anger but with an almost surgical curiosity, the way one might watch a structure collapse, beam by beam. The officer licked his lips, panic creeping through his facade. "Judge, please, that angle, it makes things look worse." "Worse?" Judy repeated. "Officer, this is you, unfiltered, unedited. Your own behavior is the angle." His shoulders sagged. The smirk was gone. Even his defiance seemed to have stepped back, leaving only a trembling shell of the arrogance he entered with. The tape ended on a final frame. The officer pushing the plaintiff into the patrol car while stumbling backward himself. Silence settled, heavy, absolute. The bailiff reached to turn off the monitor. That was when the officer whispered it, just loud enough for those closest to hear, just soft enough to terrify. A phrase that made the bailiff stiffen and made Judy's eyes narrow sharply. "Say it again," Judy demanded, louder this time. "Tell me in the comments, if you heard an officer talk like this on tape, would you trust anything he says in court?" The whisper was not an apology, it was not regret, it was something darker, sharper, a threat disguised as breath. Judge Judy's chair did not move, but something in the air around her did. It shifted, tightened, condensed, as if the courtroom itself understood the danger hidden inside the officer's quiet words. The bailiff had heard them first, his spine straightened, shoulders bracing like a barrier ready to rise between order and chaos. "Say it again," Judy instructed, voice low and surgical. The officer blinked, slow and uneven, like each eyelid weighed more than the badge slipping against his chest. He stared at the table, avoiding her eyes, his jaw clenched in stubbo. In defiance. "I don't know what you mean," he muttered. But the tremor in his voice was its own confession. The plaintiff's hands trembled in his lap. He knew that whisper. He had heard it before, cold, close, spoken at the moment when he realized this officer did not see him as a citizen, but as prey. "Your Honor," the plaintiff said softly, "he said the same thing to me, that night." Judy turned her head with a controlled precision, her expression unwavering. "Is that so?" The plaintiff nodded. "Yes, right before he shoved me, right before he laughed," he swallowed, voice cracking. It was the same sentence. The officer's breathing grew louder, sharper. "People mishear things," he snapped, "especially when they're panicking." "No one misheard you," the bailiff said, not loudly but with a weight that silenced the room. "You said it clearly." The officer shot him a glare. "You are lying, all of you are twisting." "Officer," Judy interrupted, "you are surrounded by witnesses who heard something you refuse to repeat. That is interesting. In my courtroom, silence is often louder than the words themselves." He stared at her, face flushing, eyes unfocused. The alcohol still fogged his mind, but fear was clearing patches of it, jagged openings where truth slipped through. "Tell me," Judy said steadily, "who told you that phrase? Because you did not invent it, it came from somewhere." The officer pressed his palms flat against the table, knuckles whitening. "You do not understand the pressure we are under," he spat. "What I said, it was nothing, just something I heard on the job." "From whom?" Judy pressed. He hesitated. A dangerous hesitation. A hesitation that exposed everything. "It's something we say in the precinct," he muttered. "A way of keeping people in line." The plaintiff inhaled sharply. The audience fell into a silence so complete it felt like the room had shrunk around them. Judy leaned forward an inch. "And who taught you to use those words? Who told you that this courtroom, this system, cannot touch you?" His fingers twitched. His eyes darted to the door. For a moment he looked like he might run, like a trapped animal realizing the cage was already locked. "Tell me," Judy repeated, "who promised you protection?" His lips moved, barely audible. The name hovered there, caught between fear and defiance, between loyalty and survival. And then, with a voice as fragile as glass, he whispered the name of the man who taught him to threaten the innocent. "The captain." He did not say the name loudly. He did not have to. Even whispered, it cracked through the courtroom like a bullet that had been waiting years to be fired. "The captain." The words barely left his lips, but the reaction was instant. The gallery jolted in a domino of gasps. The plaintiff stiffened in his seat. The bailiff's jaw tightened. And Judge Judy, usually immovable, tilted her head ever so slightly, like she was listening for the echo of a truth finally spoken aloud. "Which captain?" she asked, though her tone suggested she already knew. She wanted him to say it, to own it. He swallowed, Adam's apple bobbing unevenly. "Captain Rudd." A hush fell, deeper than before, the kind of silence that held consequences in its teeth. Judy exhaled once, not in surprise but in confirmation, because she had been waiting for this. "I see." The defendant blinked rapidly, panicked. "Judge, he said he'd protect me. He told me nothing could happen to me in here. He said your courtroom was all for show. He said you had no real power." The audience murmured, voices rising like low thunder before the bailiff lifted a hand for order. Judy's expression did not break, but the air around her shifted, charged, alive with a quiet force. "Interesting," she said, tone cutting with surgical precision, "because that statement directly contradicts the evidence I received this morning." The officer froze. "What evidence?" She opened a desk drawer, slow, deliberate, cinematic, and retrieved a sealed document stamped with the precinct's official emblem. She held it between two fingers, letting the camera capture its weight. "This," she said, "is a formal statement from Captain Rudd." The officer's knees almost buckled. Judy continued, voice calm enough to be terrifying. "Captain Rudd denies giving you any form of protection. He denies telling you the court has no authority. He denies instructing you to use threats or intimidation." The officer's breathing hitched. No, that is not true. He promised me." "He also denies ever approving your conduct," Judy added, flipping the document open. "In fact, he reports that if these allegations are true, he intends to take disciplinary action." The defendant shook his head violently, like a man realizing the floor beneath him was vanishing plank by plank. "He's lying. He knows what he told me. He knows he backed me." "Or," Judy said, leaning forward slightly, "he used you. And now that the truth is in daylight, he has position. Himself to survive while you fall." The officer's breath came faster, rougher. Betrayal landed on him like a weight he could not carry. The plaintiff watched him tremble, not with sympathy, but with the understanding of someone who had trembled under this man before. Judy's eyes narrowed with a precision that felt colder than any shout. "It seems, officer, that the person you trusted most has just abandoned you." A long, devastating silence followed. Judy placed the captain's statement on the desk and said, "And what you do not know is that I already possess evidence proving he was involved, and tried to erase the proof." The name had barely left his mouth. yet the aftershock of it still trembled through the room. His arrogance was gone now, collapsed under the weight of a truth he no longer controlled. For the first time since entering the courtroom, the officer looked genuinely sober, not clear-headed, just stripped. His posture sagged, shoulders caving inward as if trying to shield him from a reality he'd never believed he'd face. The badge that once propped up his ego now hung crooked and helpless against his chest. Judge Judy set Captain Rudd's statement on the bench with quiet finality. "So," she said, "your protector is already distancing himself. That tends to happen when the truth becomes inconvenient." The officer shook his head, but the motion lacked conviction. He told me he had my back. He said if anything came up, I was covered, that you couldn't touch me." "And yet," Judy replied, "here we are." His eyes darted around the room, toward the cameras, toward the plaintiff, toward the bailiff whose stance had shifted from neutrality to readiness. He looked like a man searching desperately for an exit in a room with none. The plaintiff, quiet until now, leaned forward. "He said the same thing that night, that he couldn't be punished, that no one would believe me." His voice wavered, but his gaze did not. "And I believed him." The officer flinched, physically, visibly, as if the words struck something raw inside him. Judy picked up another envelope, less formal, thinner. "This arrived at my chambers early this morning," she said. "Hand-delivered, no name." The officer's breath hitched. What is that?" "Evidence," Judy answered. "Evidence that someone else in your department thought the truth deserved daylight." She opened the envelope slowly, allowing the tension to coil tighter around the courtroom. A photocopied memo slid into view, dated, signed, time-stamped. A memo requesting an internal review of the officer's behavior. A memo that had never been investigated. The officer's face collapsed. "Oh God, someone really did." "Yes," Judy said. "Someone tried to stop you before any of this reached my courtroom, and someone else made sure that attempt disappeared." The bailiff stepped half a pace closer. "Not a threat, a precaution." The officer's breathing grew shallow. He told me the memo never existed. He said it was just rumors. He said I was safe." Judy's voice lowered, steady as stone. "Captain Rudd denied knowledge of this memo in his statement this morning." And just like that, betrayal carved itself into the officer's expression. Deep, cutting, unmistakable. The plaintiff watched with a mixture of fear and grim validation. He was witnessing the unraveling of the man who once terrified him, and realizing that power built on fear collapses fast once truth enters the room. Judy folded her hands. "Officer, before we proceed, tell this court, why would your captain protect you for years, only to abandon you now?" He opened his mouth, but no words came out, just a broken, strangled sound. Judy leaned in slightly and said, "Before you answer, understand, what I am about to reveal will change the course of this hearing. Do you think remorse should ever erase guilt? Or does accountability demand consequences no matter what?" The envelope looked harmless, thin, off-white, barely weighted. But when Judy lifted it, the officer's entire body reacted as if she were holding a detonator. Judge Judy held the letter between two fingers, the way one might hold delicate evidence at a crime scene, carefully, precisely, without allowing even a molecule of doubt to cling to it. The officer's eyes followed every movement, his breathing shallow, his world shrinking to the size of that paper. "This was hand-delivered to my chambers early this morning," Judy said. "No sender, just truth waiting to be read." The words seemed to hollow him out. He took a stumbling step backward, catching himself on the edge of the defendant's table. "Judge, please, what is that?" His voice wavered between fear and denial. "A statement," Judy replied, "from someone who has worked beside you. Someone who feared retaliation but feared silence even more." A faint rustle filled the courtroom as she slid the paper free. The sound might as well have been thunder for how the officer reacted, flinching, breath catching, hands trembling. "Gee," Judy began reading. I witnessed officer, intoxicated during multiple shifts. He verbally threatened a civilian during a routine stop. I reported this behavior, but my concerns were dismissed by command. The officer squeezed his eyes shut, shaking his head as if denial alone could rewrite what the room had just heard. Judy continued, voice steady. I cannot stay quiet while innocent people are harmed. If this reaches Judge Judy's courtroom, it means I've finally found the courage I lacked inside the precinct. A hush fell, heavy enough to press against lungs. The officer's chest rose and fell in uneven bursts. That is a lie, he choked. Someone is trying to ruin me. They all want to make me the problem when the system, when the pressure, when everything else. The pressure, Judy repeated quietly, does not excuse misconduct. He looked at her then, really looked. His eyes were red-rimmed, wet, brimming with desperation and something else. The realization that his story was no longer under his control. You do not understand, he whispered. You have no idea what we deal with. The shifts, the calls, the threats, Captain Rudd said. I was just doing what I had to do to survive. Judy's gaze sharpened. Survival, she said, does not require cruelty. The plaintiff watched him with a strange mix of fear and pity. He had seen this officer intoxicated, aggressive, and invincible, but never fragile, never exposed. You were pressured, Judy said, but you also embraced the power it gave you. You enjoyed the authority, the fear. You chose intimidation when restraint was required. His breath shuddered. I did not mean, I never wanted. His voice cracked, breaking open a truth he had no energy left to hide. Judy set the letter down gently. Tell this courtroom, officer, were you trying to prove something, to your captain or to yourself? He stared at the floor, shoulders trembling, as silence stretched over him like a shroud. Before he could answer, Judy lifted another page and said, This witness, they were not the only one who came forward. He had been unraveling slowly until now, but the moment Judy lifted that second page, something inside him simply snapped. Not loudly, not visibly, quietly like a crack appearing in the foundation of a house just before it collapses. Judge Judy held the page delicately, not for dramatic flair, but with the caution of someone handling a truth sharp enough to cut. The officer stood frozen, his hands hovering uselessly near the table, unable to anchor himself to anything solid. This, Judy said, is from another witness, someone who served under your command on several patrols. The plaintiff stiffened, anticipation tightening every muscle. The officer's voice rasped out, panicked and breathless, Judge, please. But Judy continued, reading aloud. I observed a pattern of escalating aggression from officer over the past 2 years. Attempts to intervene were met with intimidation from higher-ranking officers. Complaints were discouraged. I fear for the civilians involved and for the officer himself. She lowered the page. This person wasn't accusing you. They were worried about you. The officer blinked, hard, once, twice. He looked lost, like someone who'd prepared for battle but not for mercy. I didn't ask anyone to be worried about me, he muttered, voice cracking. I handled things. I was fine. Judy's gaze softened, not with sympathy but with understanding, the kind that sees deeper than excuses. No, officer, you were not fine, and everyone around you saw it. His shoulders sagged. A long, trembling breath escaped him. For the first time, he didn't look angry. He looked exhausted, hollowed out. A man who'd been carrying a weight he refused to acknowledge until it finally crushed him. The plaintiff swallowed hard, his voice shaking as he asked, Why did you treat me like that? I didn't do anything to you. The officer's eyes flickered toward him, haunted, fragile. Because you reminded me. His words drifted, splintering into silence. Judy leaned forward, tone gentle but firm. Reminded you of what or who? His jaw clenched, and for a moment it seemed he might retreat behind arrogance again. But the cracks were too deep now. The truth slipped through them. "You reminded me of someone I hurt before," he whispered. "Years ago, someone who never got justice, someone I pretended didn't exist." The courtroom froze. The plaintiff's breath hitched. Judy's expression sharpened, not in anger but in recognition. "Someone filed a complaint, didn't they?" she asked softly. "Long before today." He closed his eyes, nodding once brokenly. "I thought it was gone. I thought the captain said it would never surface again." Judy reached into the folder, slowly, deliberately, and withdrew a sealed document, its edges crisp and untouched by time. "Officer," she said, her voice slicing through the tension like a quiet blade, "this complaint never disappeared. It was never dism. It was simply hidden." She placed the sealed complaint on the desk. The officer's knees buckled. Judy tapped the document and said, "And the details in this old complaint are identical to what you did to the plaintiff." When Judy placed the sealed complaint on the bench, the room felt colder, not from fear, but from recognition. The past had finally stepped into the present, and it was carrying the truth by the throat. Judge Judy slid the document toward her, fingers brushing the aged envelope. Even unopened, it radiated history, pain suspended in paper, waiting to breathe again. The officer stared at it as if it were a ghost made tangible. His legs trembled, body bent inward as though gravity itself had become heavier just for him. "This," Judy said softly, "was filed nearly 7 years ago." A murmur swept through the courtroom. 7 years, a lifetime for some, a wound that never healed for others. The plaintiff watched with wide, shaken eyes. He wasn't just witnessing the officer's downfall. He was witnessing the moment his own suffering became part of a larger, darker pattern. Judy broke the seal with a crisp, deliberate motion. The sound echoed like a gavel strike. She unfolded the complaint and read silently at first. The longer she read, the heavier her expression became, not shocked, but deeply saddened, as though confirming a tragedy she already suspected. Finally, she lifted her gaze. "Officer, the behavior described here is nearly identical to what you did to the plaintiff." He winced, physically recoiled. His hands clenched the edge of the table until his knuckles whitened. "I didn't mean for any of it to," his voice fractured. "I told myself I changed. I told myself it was a one-time thing, then another, then another. And the captain, he said it didn't matter. He said it would go away." Judy's voice lowered, carrying an almost maternal gravity. "It didn't go away. You just stopped looking at it." The officer's eyes glassed over. Slowly, he sank into his chair, staring at the floor as the weight of his past pressed down on him. The bravado, the smirk, the swagger, they were gone. All that remained was a man who finally saw the wreckage behind him. The plaintiff swallowed, throat tight. "Judge, what happened to the person who filed that complaint?" Judy glanced at the document again, then answered quietly. "They withdrew it after receiving a written warning that pursuing it might complicate their future interactions with law enforcement." The room erupted in quiet outrage, gasps, shaking heads. Even the bailiff shifted, disgust etched in the furrow of his brow. The officer's face crumpled. "No," he whispered. "I didn't know that. I swear I didn't know they were threatened." Judy studied him, truly studied him, as though searching for the man hidden beneath all the layers of corruption, arrogance, and fear. "You may not have made every decision," she said, "but you benefited from all of them." Silence fell, a heavy moral silence. The plaintiff looked at the officer, voice trembling. "You hurt me because you were allowed to hurt someone else first." The officer covered his face with both hands. For the first time, he didn't look like a villain. He looked like a consequence. Judy placed both complaints side by side and said, "These will not stay hidden any longer. I am forwarding them to external authorities, beginning today." For the first time since the hearing began, the officer did not look at the cameras, or the audience, or even Judge Judy. He looked at the two complaints on the bench, the ghosts of his past, and seemed to finally understand that they were not going away this time. The courtroom felt different now. Not louder, not calmer, just heavier, as though the air carried the weight of everything that had been hidden, denied, buried, and finally unearthed. The officer sat hunched, his badge slanting downward, catching the light in a fractured way, as if even the shine no longer knew which direction to face. Judge Judy folded her hands, her voice steady but severe. "Officer, we are no longer dealing with a single incident. We are looking at a pattern, a documented history of harm that was never addressed." He didn't lift his head. His fingers traced the grain of the table, searching for something, stability maybe, or absolution. "I know," he whispered. The plaintiff watched him with a complex expression, not triumph, but a raw mixture of justice, grief, and empathy. He had come here to be heard, not to watch a man crumble. Yet truth had a way of leveling everyone it touched. Judy continued, "Let's clarify the jurisdiction before we proceed. This courtroom cannot remove you from your position. It cannot suspend your license or terminate your employment. But it can establish a record, an official public record, that will follow this case to every agency responsible for oversight." Each word struck with precision. The officer flinched as if absorbing blows. "You will not bury this again, Jay." Uddy said, "Not today." The bailiff nodded subtly, a silent affirmation of the authority behind her words. The officer finally lifted his head. His eyes were red, exhausted, stripped of pretense. "Judge, I didn't think it would get this far. I thought I could handle it. I thought it would all fade." Judy's reply was gentle but unyielding. "The past doesn't fade, officer, it waits." A tremor rippled through the courtroom, an emotional shift mirroring the gravity of consequence. The plaintiff leaned forward, voice steady but soft. "I didn't want your life ruined. I wanted the truth to matter." The officer lowered his gaze again, shame folding over him like a shadow. "It does," he said hoarsely, "whether I wanted it to or not." Judge Judy picked up a legal pad and spoke with deliberate clarity. "I will be forwarding both complaints, the current one and the older one, to the Civilian Oversight Board and to the Independent Review Commission. They will determine disciplinary action, but I will also render judgment in this civil matter today." He closed his eyes, bracing himself. "And," she added, "this record will become part of the official case history, accessible to any future review, inquiry, or investigation into your conduct." The officer's shoulders collapsed inward. The plaintiff exhaled shakily, relief and sorrow blending into something more complex. The courtroom fell into a quiet that felt like the moment before a storm breaks. Judy signaled the bailiff forward and said, "There is one more step I must take before delivering judgment, something I have rarely had to do." When Judge Judy called the bailiff forward, the room forgot how to breathe. She had never needed backup for a ruling before. Whatever she was about to do, it wasn't routine. It was unprecedented. The bailiff stepped beside the bench, a silent wall of authority. The officer's eyes followed him with dread, the kind that sinks deeper when a person realizes they're no longer feared, but monitored. Judge Judy didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her calm was sharper than shouting. "Officer," she began, "given the evidence, the pattern of misconduct, and your behavior in this courtroom today, I am issuing a sanction that, to my knowledge, has not been used in this forum before." The officer's breath hitched. His fingers curled around the table edge. Judy continued, "First, you will pay restitution to the plaintiff. Full damages. His financial losses and emotional hardship are documented and justified." The plaintiff inhaled slowly, shoulders trembling, not with victory but with release. "Second," Judy added, "this case transcript along with the 2 complaints will be forwarded directly to external authorities, the Civilian Oversight Board, the Independent Review Commission, and should further evidence develop, law enforcement." The audience gasped. Even the cameras seemed to zoom closer, drawn to the gravity thickening the air. But third, Judy said, lifting her gaze to the officer, is where the real consequence lies. The officer swallowed, his voice wavered. Judge, please. No, she replied softly, not this time. Her tone shifted, still calm, but infused with something historic. You are hereby barred from representing yourself as a law enforcement officer in any civil matter on this program. Permanently. That includes testimony, statements, uniforms, or badges. If you appear in this courtroom again, it will be only as a private civilian. Whispers exploded across the gallery. This wasn't humiliation. It was dismantling. A symbolic stripping of power in a place he once thought he dominated. The officer's hand trembled as it rose to his chest. Slowly, almost reverently, he unpinned his badge. The metal clinked softly as he placed it on the table. The sound echoed across the silent courtroom like a last breath. For a long moment, no one moved. Judge Judy studied him, not gloating, not vindictive, just steady, holding the gravity of the moment because someone had to. This badge, she said quietly, is not a prop. It is not a shield. It is not a weapon. It is a responsibility, and today you have shown the world why responsibility matters. The officer's eyes brimmed with tears. The plaintiff watched him, not with satisfaction, but with the bittersweet understanding that justice often feels heavier than vengeance. Judy leaned back slightly. Before I render my final verdict, there is one last question I must ask you. He looked up broken, empty. Why, Judy said, did you whisper that threat? Who taught you to use fear as your first language? His lips parted, hesitating on the edge of a truth he had tried to bury under ego, alcohol, and a uniform that no longer belonged to him. He finally whispered, "It wasn't meant for him, it was meant for me." Before the final verdict, ask yourself, can a person truly change, or do they just learn to hide who they are? His final whisper still trembled through the courtroom when he lifted his eyes, not in defiance this time, but in surrender. The kind that comes when a man realizes the truth he feared was never the courtroom's judgment, but his own. Judge Judy regarded him with a long, contemplative silence. It wasn't the icy stillness she'd used earlier. It was steadier, more solemn. The kind of quiet that honors gravity rather than enforces it. "What do you mean?" she asked gently. "It was meant for you." The officer swallowed, gaze dropping to the badge lying on the desk. For a moment he reached toward it, reflex, muscle memory, but his hand stopped halfway, hovering over the symbol he no longer had the right to touch. "That phrase," he said, voice thick with truth he could no longer hold back. "It was what he, Captain Rudd, used to say to me when I messed up, when I was scared. When I didn't think I could handle the job, he'd get close, real close, and whisper it. He said fear keeps us sharp, keeps us loyal." Judy nodded slowly, her expression deepening with understanding, not approval, understanding. "So you repeated it," she said, "not because you wanted to threaten the plaintiff, but because it had become the only language you were ever taught in moments of stress." His breath hitched. "I didn't even realize I said it until the tape. It just came out, like I wasn't talking to him, like I was talking to myself." The plaintiff watched him, eyebrows knitting with a conflicted empathy. "That doesn't make it okay," he said softly, "but I understand it now." The officer turned toward him, eyes brimming. "I'm sorry, I really am. Not because I got caught, but because I see what I became, and it scares me." Judge Judy straightened, not rigid, intentional. "Officer," she said, "what you are feeling right now is the beginning of accountability, not the end." Her voice filled the courtroom with a gravity that quieted every breath. "You were shaped by a toxic system, but you made choices inside that system, choices that harmed innocent people. Pain may explain your behavior, but it does not excuse it." He nodded slowly. absorbing each word like a verdict he needed to hear to start breathing again. Judy continued, "The plaintiff deserves closure, and so does the community you served." She picked up her ruling. In this civil matter, judgment is entered in full for the plaintiff. Restitution is awarded. All complaints, past and present, will be forwarded to oversight authorities, and your conduct today will be included in that submission. He closed his eyes, a tear slipping free. Not dramatic, not performative, just real. "The badge you set down today," Judy said softly, "is not the end of your story, but it is the end of the story you told yourself, that power is protection and fear is strength." The plaintiff exhaled, relief balancing delicately with sorrow. Judy delivered her final words with quiet force, a moral echo that lingered in the air long after they left her lips. "Authority isn't what shields us. Character is. And no matter how deeply truth is buried, arrogance always collapses beneath its weight." The gavel fell. Not like punishment, like closure.